Let us pray. Our Father, we thank you for your abundant blessings to our province and to ourselves. We ask you to ensure to us your guidance and the will to follow it. Amen.
Introduction of visitors.
Thank you. Seated in the Speaker's Gallery this day are two former members of the Legislative Assembly. First that we would recognize is Robert Clark, otherwise known as Bob, first elected at the by-election of November the 30th, 1960, and served in this Assembly until 1982, and was Leader of the Official Opposition from 1973 until 1982. I wonder if Mr. Clark would please rise. Also in the gallery, Jim McPherson, who represented Red Deer from 1982 until 1986. And I wonder if the Assembly might also welcome him.
Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees, notices of motions, introduction of bills, tabling returns and reports.
Mr. Speaker, on July the 18th, I promised to see if it would be possible to table a copy of an agreement regarding the Husky upgrader. At the time, I noticed from Hansard I misunderstood the question from the Honourable Leader, the Honourable Member from Westlock Sturgeon, to whether or not I could table this document. I have the document here and am now tabling it.
Introduction of special guests. Ministerial statements.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to announce today that the Alberta government will extend the Farm Fertilizer Price Protection Plan for an additional year. The program, which was announced on April 1, 1985, was due to expire tomorrow. However, in keeping with this government's commitment to reduce input costs to our farmers, our government is extending the program for an additional year. Mr. Speaker, the Alberta Farm Fertilizer Price Protection Plan helps farmers reduce production costs by paying a grant of $50 per ton of actual nitrogen and $25 per ton of actual phosphate in fertilizer grades purchased and used from August 1, 1984 to July 31, 1987. Fertilizer can make up to 30% of the cash input costs of crop production. Dryland farmers seeding wheat in southeastern Alberta may spend $15 an acre on fertilizer, while north central Alberta farmers growing barley and/or canola may spend $25 an acre or more. With Canadian Wheat Board initial prices announced to be from 19 to 29% lower beginning the new crop year August 1, 1986, this program becomes even more important for our farmers. So far, Mr. Speaker, my department has received over 44,000 applications under the Farm Fertilizer Price Protection Plan. This represents a total payment of just under $30 million, or an average payment per farm family of roughly $950. Mr. Speaker, announcing the continuation of the Fertilizer Price Protection Plan now gives Alberta farmers the advance assurance that their costs will be lower for an important component of next spring's crop inputs. Combined with this government's commitment to lower the cost of farm fuels, farm chemicals, farm fertilizers, and the cost of credit, Alberta farmers have the lowest input costs of any in Canada.
Mr. Speaker, in standing reply to the ministerial announcement, whenever we're dealing with input costs under very difficult situations in the farm community, obviously we will agree in the official opposition with the intent of it. Just a couple of points, though, Mr. Speaker. We certainly, as I say, agree with the extension of the fertilizer price protection plan, but the $50 a ton, will that be going to the farmers or the companies? Because I'm sure the minister is aware that there was some concern in the past that that money wasn't necessarily reaching the farm gate, that it was actually going to the fertilizer companies, and of course that's not the purpose of this particular grant. So I would suggest that perhaps it should go to the farmers directly as opposed to the companies, so that the farmers then could negotiate the best possible deal. But in failing that, I hope that there is a monitoring system, because we did raise that many times with the previous minister, and there was different complaints across the province. So at least the monitoring system would be there to make sure that it is going to the farm gates. The only other point that I would make, Mr. Speaker, is that I applaud this, but I suggest to the government that these are precisely the things that might be up for grabs in any free trade negotiations and agreement. So I draw that as a qualifier, Mr. Speaker. The things that we're doing to help our farmers could be directly against any sort of free trade agreement. Thank you.
Oral question period.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to direct the first question to the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care. In regard to many rumors floating around, I want to have the Minister give us a chance to know where we're at. Can the Minister advise whether or not he has reached an understanding with the Alberta Medical Association regarding an end to extra billing in Alberta?
Mr. Speaker, as I've indicated in the House earlier, the process of trying to work out an arrangement that will meet the terms of the Canada Health Act is one of me consulting firstly with the Alberta Medical Association, in part with other healthcare practitioners, with the federal Minister of Health, the Honourable Jacob Epp, and then consulting with our Cabinet and the Government Caucus before finally coming to some conclusion. Again, as I've indicated earlier, it's my hope that we will be in a position before this session concludes for me to be able to make an announcement in the legislature with regard to those negotiations.
Well, just to follow up then, Mr. Speaker, is it the intention then of the government or the minister to introduce legislation formalizing any understanding or agreement reached with the AMA regarding the end of extra billing, and would that be brought in this session of the legislature?
Mr. Speaker, that's a very important question. As I understand the terms of the Canada Health Act, and in accordance with my discussions with the federal minister, there are several options that present themselves with respect to an end to or an elimination of extra billing so we can qualify for the federal payments, one of which would involve legislation of the nature that Ontario took, that route. And the other options that do exist, of course, are to come to some agreement with the medical practitioners, and then the federal minister would observe, I believe it's for a period of 3 months, as to whether or not the agreement is working. In other words, Mr. Speaker, it's not my understanding that the Federal Health Act specifically requires legislation. There are other means by which the result can be achieved.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, that may well be the case, but following from the minister's answer, if we do not have a formalized agreement which this legislature, say, ratifies, what would stop medical doctors from reverting to extra billing after this understanding was over?
Well, the honourable leader's hypothetical situation is a matter for debate when and if we are able to make an announcement in the House, and when and if we table legislation, and I'd be more than pleased to deal with it then.
No. Supplementary question. It's a very important point, Mr. Speaker. So just to follow up, to make sure that we're clear then, the minister is saying then that he does not intend to ratify this in this legislative session with this agreement with the Alberta Medical Association.
No, first of all, I might add, Mr. Speaker, I agree it's an extremely important point, but what I did say was that the whole question of whether we would have an agreement or legislation or a combination of two is a matter that I presently have under consideration. And if and when I'm able to present something to the current sitting of the legislature, we would then have an opportunity for the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to debate it.
Member for West Lot Sturgeon.
Supplemental also to the minister, can he assure the House that he will not reach or sign an agreement with the medical profession that does in any way jeopardize the $30 million we have or more coming? In other words, any agreement will assure will not be signed unless we get the money back from the federal government.
Well, at this stage, Mr. Speaker, it would be difficult for me to give any guarantees to the Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party or anyone else. All I can do is repeat what I've said earlier, and that is that our objective in entering into discussions with the Alberta Medical Association is to ensure a continuation of a health care program in this province that I believe is second to none, and at the same time meet the terms of the Canada Health Act, or at least convince the federal minister we've met those terms, which means we will be refunded the funds that are presently being withheld. So that's our objective, but for me to assure anyone that it will happen is premature.
Member for Little Bow.
Supplementary question to the minister, and it's with regards to the negotiation with the Alberta Medical Association. Is the minister currently negotiating a new fee schedule as well with the association at the present time in these discussions relative to extra billing? And if so, in that, as one of the items in negotiation, would the item of open negotiations be a commitment towards the medical profession, which would be part of a trade-off in terms of extra billing?
Well, I'm not, Mr. Speaker, I'm not exactly sure what the honourable member means by open negotiations. I have always been involved in open negotiations with whoever wants to negotiate. On the question of whether or not we're involved in discussing fee increases or decreases with regard to the Alberta Healthcare Insurance Plan fee schedule, I can say, as I've said, I believe in the House before, certainly I've said it outside, that there are certain areas where the medical practitioners have said to me they believe the fee schedule to be low in comparison to the amount of time and effort that goes into a certain procedure by a medical practitioner, and in comparison with other provinces. The most notable of those is the fee schedule that's provided for maternity, which is some $340 for, I believe, 10 visits plus the delivery of a baby and 2 visits afterwards. That comparable schedule in British Columbia and Ontario is about $500. So I've said to the medical profession, I'm willing to look at any fee schedule changes that can be shown to be unfair or too low at the present time, and see if we can't find some way to increase those. The second thing, Mr. Speaker, it's very important, and I'll conclude that. Okay.
The chair really believes that the answer's gone full term. Perhaps the Leader of the Opposition, second main question.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct my second question to the Solicitor General. Mr. Speaker, the last thing that anyone wants in this province is another labor dispute, particularly not one involving the ALCB for most Albertans under a Conservative government. Mr. Speaker, could the minister assure the House that his department is doing everything possible to encourage negotiation so the strike can be avoided, recognizing that it's much harder to achieve a settlement after a strike has occurred?
Mr. Speaker, indeed, it's best not to have a strike situation, and especially with the ALCB. I think the public has been unjustly treated with the recent brewery and strikes, etc., every summer. I can assure the Honourable Leader of the Opposition that the ALCB is currently negotiating with AUPE, the union involved, and that it's encouraging to note that negotiations were only going to be conducted on Tuesday and today. That has now been extended to include tomorrow, Thursday, and hopefully the strike can be avoided.
Supplementary question. I'd heard that also, and I agree with the Minister that that is encouraging. Just to follow up, has the Minister met with the chair of the ALCB, say this week, in order to receive assurances that the board is showing maximum flexibility in negotiations?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I've had meetings with the chairman of ALCB, and they are wholeheartedly concerned with bringing this matter to settlement prior to strike, and we are very flexible.
Speaker, supplementary questions. In view of the fact that the negotiations are on Wednesday and Thursday with, I think, a possible strike deadline of Thursday evening, as I understand it, would the Minister be prepared to meet directly with the President of the Provincial Employees Union to see if there is some room for movement on either side which might prevent a strike?
Mr. Speaker, the Liquor Control Board is a Crown corporation which operates at arm's length, and I don't think at this stage it would be appropriate for the Minister to be directly involved in negotiations. They have their own mandate. As I mentioned, we're certainly flexible and hope that agreement can be made prior to the Thursday midnight deadline.
Mr. Speaker, I'm well aware of that, but the point they were trying to do is avoid a strike. But let me move my last supplementary to the Minister responsible for personnel. Mr. Speaker, the dispute seems to center on job security rather than money issues at this particular time. My question to the Minister, is there a government policy position on job security and position abolishment which could provide a guide for ALCB negotiators on government goals in that area?
Mr. Speaker, the approach of the government to downsizing in the public service has been well explained in this legislature before. That approach would certainly apply to any downsizing in the Alberta Liquor Control Board. With regard to job security, of course, this particular group do not function under the Public Service Administration Act. They're under the Labour Relations Act, and job security is, of course, a matter for negotiation between the parties.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Solicitor General. Is the Solicitor General in a position to assure us that if a strike does take place, the strikers will have a job to come back to after it is settled?
Mr. Speaker, there is not a strike at present.
Question is theoretical. There is no strike. Main question, Leader of the Liberal Party.
Go on, it's your main question.
You're making it tough, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Agriculture, this is to the Minister of Agriculture. The Minister has indicated in the House at least twice that his government endorses the position of placing $10 per bushel base price on domestic wheat. But contrary to the Minister's statement yesterday, is the Minister aware that the Alberta bakers foresee at least a 15 cents rise in a loaf of bread when the two-price system of wheat is implemented?
Mr. Speaker, contrary to what the honourable member has indicated, our figures show that there will be in the vicinity of a 5-cent increase on bread in the event that it is implemented, whereby we do have a two-price wheat system. I should share with the honourable member also that we're hoping to have the federal government, in the event that they do implement it, and it's still under consideration by the federal government, that they do implement it on the basis so that it does not have an impact that could cause any fluctuations to the real market. We're hoping that farmers will benefit by it, but we're also hoping that they can impact it so that there will not be a detrimental impact as it relates to the consumers. We recognize that there is going to be an additional cost, but we also recognize that during these times of difficulties for the agricultural sector, it is important to implement programs that will be beneficial to them.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, we can believe that wheat can be increased in price and not flour. He still believes in the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy. But has the Minister determined the actual increase, of any, in cash income to the Alberta farmers under this two-price system, considering, as he said yesterday, such a small amount is purchased domestically?
Mr. Speaker, I would suggest to the honourable member that he turn up his hearing aid, because I indicated to him that the cost would be in the vicinity of 5 cents on a loaf of bread. I acknowledge there is going to be an additional cost. I also indicated to him in the House yesterday and answered his first supplementary yesterday, whereby I indicated that it will only affect approximately 10% of the wheat produced in Canada, because that is about the figure that is used for human consumption.
Mr. Speaker, obviously we're not communicating. I think our gentleman up there is operating this thing. I did ask him what the effect would be on the farmers, not the consumers. The first question was that we didn't agree on a 5-cent loaf, and I will give him names to call later on. But let's move on. What protection will be given to Alberta millers and bakers to ensure that they are not being underpriced by their American counterparts, who will then be able to purchase Alberta wheat and Alberta flour at up to a third to 40% less than what Alberta millers will be able to produce it at?
Mr. Speaker, just prior to getting into the meat of the honourable member's question, I couldn't help but notice when the Liberals gathered for their policy conference and they discussed agriculture that it was reported the honourable member was absent. Had he been there, he would have seen that his own party endorsed a good many of the proposals that this government has put forward on a regular basis. In specific answer to his question, I should share with him that this, of course, falls under federal jurisdiction. And that is why we've made recommendations to our federal counterparts that they also give full consideration to take into account the impact that it possibly could have for millers. They have a number of avenues that they can explore to make sure that our grain producers are given a greater payment for their products. This is one avenue that they are exploring, and hopefully they will come forward with something that is not detrimental also to our flours.
Mr. Speaker, the final supplementary to stop the blizzard. If I may underscore my last question to the Minister, can he tell this Assembly how many jobs will be lost in Alberta's milling and baking industries when the two-price system comes in, which will make them uncompetitive with their American counterparts?
Hypothetical question. Supplementaries on this issue. Main question, Leader of the Representative Party, followed by the member for Calgary-Buffalo.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Premier, and so with regards to the question of the PGRT and the response of the Premier yesterday saying he was losing his patience with regards to this matter, and I can certainly understand that. What I would like to know from the Premier in terms of that is what is the strategy of the Alberta government at the present time in bringing about a quick resolution with regards to this matter? It seems that we're waiting for the Ottawa government to do something. Is there a strategy in place by the Minister or by the Premier?
Yes and yes, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to either the Premier or the Energy Minister, and it's with regards to a possible meeting, an informal meeting between the provincial minister and the federal Energy Minister tomorrow. And I was wondering to the Premier specifically, then, has the Premier advised the Minister to place at the top of the agenda of that meeting the question of the PGRT and its removal?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the Premier. It is my understanding that the provincial royalty rate on new oil will change from 32.5% to 32% on August 1st this year. Could the Premier indicate at this point whether there has been a reconsideration of that with the possibility of a further reduction than the 32% on new oil?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Minister of Energy may wish to add to this. However, the reason I wanted to comment is that first, there is a variety of royalties on new oil. There is no royalty for a year on new oil. And then there's that category that was created some time ago, back that created something called new oil for royalty purposes. So I just want to be clear that there are two kinds. But secondly, Mr. Speaker, we do not wish to be discussing the removal of the PGRT tax in any way in relation to the people of Alberta's ownership share of the resource that they are selling. That is their royalty. There is no comparison between the two, and we will resist, in every case, any attempt to tie the two together.
Minister of Energy.
Just to make a minor correction to the member who raised the question, as of August the 1st, the marginal rates will come down from 33.5% to 32% for new oil and gas, and from 43.5 to 42 for old. These are the marginal rates, and I think I should emphasize again that with these marginal rates, the average gross royalty for old, combining old and new oil together, is 26%. And then after deducting the royalty tax credit and royalty holidays and relief for enhanced oil recovery, the average net rate is approximately 15%.
Supplementary question to either the Premier or the Minister. The industry sources advised me that by a reduction in this royalty rate that we could stimulate greater investment by the industry, or maybe greater stability. And my question to either is, has the government studied that matter? Are there formal reports with regards to that? And could either the Minister or the Premier indicate the findings to confirm that position of the industry at the present time?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important to note that many small companies do not pay any royalties at all. With the royalty tax credit as a maximum of $3 million, many of the small companies don't pay any royalties whatsoever. So in terms of their investing in activity is not related to the fact that they're paying royalty rates. It's related to the cash flow situation for those companies. I think that the marginal rate reduction plan that was announced last year, and which August 1st is a further reduction, with an additional reduction scheduled for next year, down to 40% and 30% for old and new. Those things will help. However, the industry has indicated that we review our royalty structure, and we will.
Member for West Loch Sturgeon.
Supplementary to the Minister of Energy, would the Minister of Energy consider what the Saskatchewan government used a few years ago with great success to get the industry underway again, creating jobs, and that is to declare a one-year holiday on royalties? New oil, I'm sorry.
We do have that, Mr. Speaker, in this province.
Member for Edmonton Norwood.
Well, Mr. Speaker, just to follow up, apparently the minister has been quoted as suggesting a gasoline tax. Would the minister indicate if this is something that he's brought up with his federal counterparts, and are they considering this seriously?
Mr. Speaker, I am not advocating a gasoline tax. I think the honourable member has indicated, there's a story out there that I've been indicating there should be a 5 cent a litre or whatever on at the pump. I was responding to some questions about whether the federal government should be involved in assisting the energy industry should low prices maintain over an extended period of time, and I certainly think they should. And the question was asked, well, then where are they going to get their money? Well, there are a number of alternatives, and one possibility is a tax of the pump. That's only one alternative. Certainly, we're not advocating that particularity. We will be talking to the federal government about a number of alternatives, but that certainly is one possibility.
Member for Calgary Buffalo, followed by the member for Edmonton Centre.
Question to the Honourable Minister of Education. Make this a full day. In recent years, we've become aware of the fact that many children of average or superior intelligence have learning disabilities which require specialized training. And rural areas in particular have problems dealing with the needs of these children. In early June, 8 residents of the Rocky View School District outside of Calgary wrote to you expressing grave concerns about the unsatisfactory experience of their children, including problems receiving funding for remedial training at the Foothills Academy. The question is, could you please advise, Madam Minister, what your department is doing by way of assessing the program in the Rocky View District in response to these concerns and the serious consequences for the future of these children?
Mr. Speaker, I will always have under review the programs for all students in this province, whether they are the gifted, the handicapped, or the so-called normal student. I think I will continue to do that, and as respect to the specific issue that the member raises and a request for a response from me, I will look into the matter.
Does the minister have any plans for an overall review or changes to the programs for learning disabled children in rural areas in order that they can be assured a fair shake in life?
Mr. Speaker, one of the items which we will be dealing with today as part of my budget is the response centers. The response centers, although they will be headquartered in Edmonton and Calgary because that is where the greatest resources with respect to special education are located, they really will be focused on the needs of the rural community and with particular emphasis on the special education needs in the rural community. I look forward to receiving the approval of this legislature to proceed with those response centers.
Does the minister plan any changes in the current funding system of $167 per resident pupil in light of complaints of the Calgary and Edmonton school boards that they educate a disproportionately high number of students?
Mr. Speaker, it's true that this budget contains a grant of $166 for every single student in the school jurisdiction, be they special needs students or not. In addition to the problems which Edmonton, Calgary, and other jurisdictions have raised with me in that they are a magnet of sorts because they offer an excellent program and therefore attract students into their program, there is in place a contingency fund which can be used if those boards can show that in fact they are educating a greater number of these students than perhaps the norm would be.
Is the minister reconsidering the cut in funding for schools for the learning disabled, such as the Foothills Academy in Calgary, which cut is supposed to come into effect in September of this year?
I don't believe we're cutting support to schools in this province, and that is, of course, a private school. The support for their program will continue. I think they're doing an excellent one. Whether we are backing off on that support, I don't fully agree with the honourable member.
Member for Edmonton Avonmore.
To the Minister of Education, is she considering additional grants to rural municipalities to help offset the tuition paid to the larger systems when they educate the special education students?
Mr. Speaker, that is precisely why we have a resident pupil grant which funds every single student in the jurisdiction. If the jurisdiction feels that they cannot meet the needs, the special education needs of a student within their jurisdiction and therefore sends that student to another one, the funding which the Department of Education has provided to that jurisdiction can therefore follow the student. I think it's the best approach.
Member for Edmonton Centre, followed by the member for Edmonton Calder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A major report recently released by the U.S. Institute of Medicine called For-Profit Enterprise in Healthcare has roundly condemned private for-profit systems of management of healthcare. What specific program audit is the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care doing of Extendicare's $400,000 private management of the Athabasca Hospital to evaluate how quality of care is being affected at that hospital?
Mr. Speaker, the arrangement between Extendicare is between Extendicare and the board of the Athabasca Hospital, and the honourable member could refer his questions to that board.
I thought it was mandated by the former hospitals minister, and a very important question for this assembly to debate. Can the minister assure the assembly that no other contracts are being considered in the province for private management of sick care people until the effect of quality of care at the Athabasca Hospital has been assessed?
Well, first of all, my understanding of the arrangements in Athabasca are entirely different than the honourable member purports them to be. We've got a situation where the board of the Athabasca Hospital is still very much in control of the operation. They have, instead of employing an administrator and a director of nursing and a variety of other senior staff, such as most boards do, decided to employ a management firm. That operation, no doubt, will be monitored by the board and by staff of my department, and in due course I hope that we will learn something from that style. But that should not be confused in the honourable member's mind with hospitals for profit or private hospitals. It is nothing of the kind. I might add, Mr. Speaker, that I would view the arrangement that is going on in Athabasca, if it's successful in terms of cost control, to be something that we would be very interested in extending to other hospitals in the province. I see absolutely nothing wrong with it in terms of the principle, particularly when the locally elected board is still in charge.
I'm not confused about the power that Extendicare has. As it is the major actor among private-run nursing homes whose return on investment is over 30% for nursing home care, what is the minister doing to encourage more involvement in nursing home care by community, nonprofit, religious, and service-oriented organizations which consistently have demonstrated better quality of care in nursing homes?
A portion of the question was opinion. The minister can reply to the question, please.
Well, Mr. Speaker, quite contrary to the honourable member's statements, the private nursing home operators in this province have been receiving very close to the same per diem assistance from the province for operating their nursing homes as have the board-operated nursing homes. The exception is some $2 per day, which was considered in 1964 to be a reasonable amount to provide to the private operators for capital. Again, contrary to what the honourable member might suggest should happen, we are now looking at and assessing the possibility of providing some capital assistance to private nursing home operators so that they might upgrade some of the nursing homes that have been built many years ago and continue to provide a high level of service. Honourable members should know that for many years now we've been financing 100% of the capital development costs of board-operated hospitals and pertinent or nothing for privately operated hospitals, and indeed some of the ones that are operated, I should say nursing homes, some of the ones operated by religious organizations have also been done without any assistance from the government. So by far the preferred position in terms of capital development monies has went to the board-operated nursing homes.
That does lead to my last question, Mr. Speaker, which is to ask the minister what guarantees he is building into his system to ensure that the extra monies going to private nursing homes are going to quality of care, not excessive profits.
Well, I should refer the honourable member to the Hyde report, as it's referred to, on nursing home care in Alberta, which was commissioned by my colleague some years ago, and also refer him to more than one announcement or ministerial statement by the former Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care regarding the extensive improvements that have been made over the course of the last 3 years in respect to nursing home care, particularly with regard to the number and quality of nursing hours, particularly with regard to the provision of food, nursing care, that kind of thing in nursing homes. The only thing that we have yet to address with respect to particularly the private nursing homes is how we might assist them in providing some capital assistance so they can upgrade their nursing homes that's at least equal to or partly equal to what we provide to the board-operated nursing home. We're now in the process of doing that. And Mr. Speaker, I just conclude I'd be happy to provide the honourable member with all that information.
The chair is a touch concerned, especially in this series of questions, that the poser of the question seems to believe that this is exercise is a dialogue which transpires while answers are being given. In actual fact, it really is a matter of posing the question and hopefully listening to what a hopefully reasoned answer is. And again, with respect to the question period, perhaps we could revert to what it really is all about. The chair then recognizes the member for Edmonton Supplementary, Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, to the minister, taking that Athabasca as its own board is independent, could the minister assure the House that he will have a group monitoring the study to pass back the knowledge and information gained by the experiment in Athabasca?
Well, it's fair to say, Mr. Speaker, that we would intend to learn anything that can be learned from that particular approach to that the board is using to manage their hospital. Yes.
Member for Edmonton Calder, followed by the member for Calgary Mountain View.
To the Minister of Social Services, although this government provides a significant amount of funding for daycare, the issue of quality care for our children is a continuing problem. Is the minister doing any formal review of value for public expenditure and child care standards for the province?
Mr. Speaker, I had mentioned in the House on another occasion on that very important matter that I had staff in from every region of the province to discuss daycare. The staff has initiated a discussion amongst themselves and senior people in Edmonton, and they have under review now a manual which will more directly reflect what we believe the standards ought to be on a more uniform basis across the province.
Supplementary to the minister. Will the minister undertake then in a review specifically addressing the need for better educational qualifications for childcare? Staff as advocated by the Alberta Association of Social Workers and the Alberta Association for Young Children?
Mr. Speaker, it's fair to say that all matters are under consideration, but there is a there's a large diversification in views across the province. I've been hearing from many individual parents who have taken great exception to what they believe to be an enforcement of a manner in which children will be raised. But the honourable member is quite right in raising it from the aspect of a number of the organizations who have responded and believed that there ought to be specific qualifications with respect to daycare workers, and that too is under advisement.
That's good to hear. What is the minister doing to improve public access to information on the results of licensing investigations in view of the fact that an unlicensed centre in Calgary was allowed to operate for a lengthy period of time?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure I understand the exact purport of the honourable member's question. Obviously, if somebody is operating some kind of a child care centre or taking children in that we would be unaware of and not licensed, I'm not sure with that lack of knowledge on our part that we could make the public aware of such a situation. Hopefully, with all the discussion that there has been about childcare over the course of the last year or so, that the public would be very much aware that in the case of institutional style of care or where there are very many children in care in a private home, that indeed those facilities have to be licensed.
Final supplementary to the minister. Has the minister done any review of the amounts of money which other provinces receive from the Canada Assistance Plan due to their deliberate encouragement of non-profit centres, due to the fact that Alberta loses millions of dollars each year under the same program due to our reliance on for-profit childcare centres?
Mr. Speaker, we're very aware that the federal government has a different philosophy with respect to childcare across the country, a philosophy incidentally not shared by the majority of the people in this province, who have chosen private centres for care of their children and are very satisfied from the information I receive about those private centres. True, there are concerns raised about a number of centres, but in fact they seem to be equally shared between the not-for-profit as well as the private centres, so I don't think there's any miracle to be worked just because we're talking about a not-for-profit organization. I take great exception to the federal government literally blackmailing us, saying this is what you will do with respect to childcare in the province of Alberta in order to receive your dollars back. And I will certainly be undertaking major discussions with the federal minister.
Member for Calgary Mountain View.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have in front of me the text of a letter sent to a 62-year-old woman in Calgary, and I'd like to raise its contents with the Minister of Community and Occupational Health.
Very difficult with respect to question period.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask, it has to do with the AIDS to Daily Living program. It is a woman who requires a frequent use of oxygen. She's confined to a wheelchair. And I would like to know why his department is removing this equipment and stopping paying for oxygen for a woman in these circumstances who cannot pay for it herself.
Mr. Speaker, I'd certainly welcome any information that the honourable member would care to bring to my attention. He's probably had that document in his hands at least since earlier today, and rather than making quick political points here in this assembly, if he was going to do the truly honourable moral thing, he'd bring it to my attention immediately.
Perhaps a supplementary question, please.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I learned at 1 o'clock this afternoon that his department has changed the criteria in his department for people receiving oxygen under AIDS to Daily Living support. It's happened at the end of June 1986, so he's been aware of it for a while. How many people in this province have...
Please. The question.
Mr. Speaker, how many people have lost the benefit of this program in Alberta in the last month since this criteria was changed?
Mr. Speaker, I'll take the question as notice and get back to the honourable member, but I repeat, Mr. Speaker, cheap political points on the backs of people...
Sorry. The minister is out of order. Supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of the people who have been cut off from this program in the last month, does the minister know how many are going to end up in hospital because they can't afford oxygen, and how much that's going to cost the taxpayers of this province?
Mr. Speaker, no one in need in this province. Those needs shall go met. They shall not go unmet.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the minister if he would tell the Assembly how much money has been saved by this change in criteria in the Department of Community Scrooges and Occupational Simon Legrees.
Chair recognizes the member for Calgary-Buffalo.
Mr. Speaker, a question to the Honourable Minister of Hospitals. Mr. Minister, under the Mental Health Act and the Hospital Acts, there is provision for access to medical files. The hospitals in Calgary and Edmonton, unfortunately, make it almost impossible for low-income people to get access to these files by virtue of charging exorbitant fees. The Edmonton hospitals charge a $35 access fee plus $2 a page.
Care to sit down, please, honourable members? Thank you. Perhaps the question can now be framed. We have had more than sufficient preamble.
Mr. Speaker, I'd understood one gets up to three short sentences, and
I think if you check the record, they're not short sentences.
I would appreciate if the minister would advise this House whether he is aware and supportive fees of this magnitude which are being charged both in Edmonton and in Calgary?
Well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, I'm not quite sure that the preamble is accurate in terms of a patient's access to records being identical in the case of records held under the Mental Health Act and records held by active treatment hospitals under the Hospitals Act. I would want to check that very carefully because I think there is some difference. In other words, one of the debates that's now going on with respect to the possible introduction of a new Mental Health Act does involve access to records by people who are involuntary patients in mental hospitals. So that's a separate question I'd like to deal with. But on the question of whether or not patients have ready access to their records from active treatment hospitals, I would like to check into that. I've had one instance very recently where an individual wrote with respect to a hospital in Calgary concerned about obtaining a record, but I wasn't made aware in that letter that there was any particular charge. I'd be pleased to look into it, and I could just say to the House, I believe that if the charge that's being levied by a hospital with respect to a person asking for their records is meant to prevent them from getting the record, then I believe it's wrong.
Well, it is so meant, and the issue is the same, and that under the Mental Health Act and the Hospitals Act, it's the copying charge. If the minister finds that this is the case, will the minister consider legislation limiting the right of hospitals to charge such extortionate fees?
Mr. Speaker, without having looked into it, I wouldn't want to make that commitment, but I can say I believe if the charge is meant to prevent patients from getting a record that they're legitimately entitled to, then I believe it is wrong. What I'm able to do about it, I don't know. I'll consider that.
Would the minister also consider at the same time whether he would be supportive of broader privacy legislation which advances the right to access generally of citizens to files held with respect to them by government and controls the costs thereof?
That's an entirely new question, Mr. Speaker, that has much broader implications than I'm able to respond to during the question period.
Time for question period has expired. Is this a point of order? Thank you.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, and in regard to a direction you gave us earlier to raise them immediately after question period, I should share with the House that there were some inaccuracies as it relates to the Farm Fertilizer Protection Plan conveyed to the House by the individual who responded on behalf of the New Democratic Party, in that he indicated this payment should be made direct to the farmers. In fact, that's the way it is administered, Mr. Speaker. In fact, also, we do monitor it, and it has been shown that it has been very effective to the farming population. And just so that the record is clear, we wouldn't want any misunderstanding in the rural population. The rebate grant goes directly to the farmer.
Thank you. That was a point of information rather than a point of order. All right, let us discover what this particular point of order is.
Same point of information. The point that we tried to make about the monitoring system is there was a great deal of complaint about the program last year. And I was just suggesting then that the monitoring system be tightened up so it is in fact ending up at the farm gate, and we thought that was a helpful suggestion to make.
There is a point of order to be dealt with respect to yesterday's session, but also with regard to, so that all members of the Assembly might be clear as to the Chair's interjection with respect to the question as raised by the member for Calgary Mountain View. Citation from Beauchesne 362. Reading telegrams, letters, or extracts from newspapers, in this case was a letter, as an opening to an oral question is an abuse of the rules of the House. And that was the reason why the Chair intervened at that particular stage, and then the member responded by then rephrasing the question without reading the extracts from the letter. With respect to the point of order yesterday, during oral question period, a statement was made by the Leader of the Official Opposition with regard to a difference of opinion between himself and the Solicitor General. The Leader of the Opposition claims to have had information supporting his contention, which perhaps the Minister does not have in his possession. Perhaps both parties might consider private discussion on this matter outside the House. Apparent differences of opinion are from time to time raised in the House, and in this regard I refer all members to Beauchesne 322, page 114, which reads, "It has been formally ruled by speakers that a statement by a member respecting himself and particularly within his own knowledge must be accepted, but is not unparliamentary temperately to criticize statements made by a member as being contrary to the facts. But no imputation of intentional falsehood is permissible. On rare occasions, this may result in the House having to accept two contradictory accounts of the same incident. I trust this is a rare occasion." When the points of order were raised at the end of question period, an exchange took place with regard to Beauchesne and the use of parliamentary and unparliamentary language. Beauchesne, 4th edition, 1978, does indeed list in citation 320, page 108, quote, "not telling the truth," close a quote, as being unparliamentary. However, citation 320, page 113, records that the word, quote, "untrue," close a quote, is parliamentary. Such conflicting advice is not very helpful. In the discussion of the points of order, the chair cited Beauchesne 357 Q and T, which reads, "A question, oral or written, must not Q, contain or imply charges of a personal character, T, impugn the accuracy of information conveyed to the House by a minister," close a quote. The Leader of the Opposition twice stated that he was not impugning the motives of the minister. The chair has decided that the Leader of the Opposition and the Solicitor General indeed have a difference of opinion with respect to the issue as raised. Further, the chair believes that the Leader of the Opposition has clarified his remark in that his comment was not, quote, "not impugning the motives of the minister," close of quote, and therefore was not a personal attack upon the Solicitor General.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. With regard to an earlier ruling today, but I'm allowed to bring it up at the end of question period, I gather, about my question being hypothetical to the Minister of Agriculture. I don't see how, the ruling of being hypothetical when I asked the Minister if he has studies to show how many jobs will be lost in Alberta if he when the price of wheat. Well, when the price of wheat system is in. That's not it. Surely, Mr. Speaker, surely, Mr. Speaker, there's a policy he's going to...
The honourable member has been kind enough to answer his own question and to prove that the chair was indeed right in its ruling. Orders of the day.
Committee of Supply.